Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange MacCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, Dianna. Welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thanks, Ange. I'm excited to be here too. It's great to see you again.
Yes, likewise. So let's tell our viewers, where are you zooming in from and who do you work for?
I am in the state of Illinois, kind of around the nose of Illinois, I guess you would call it. But for those of you not used to the States, but I work for a company called Uncommon. We are an IT consulting company. I'm in HR. I have about 10 years of experience in HR. So the rest of the geniuses do all their things, and I do what I can do to support them as we grow the company. So, yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And what I'm really excited about having on the podcast, Dianna, is because we've been kind of back and forth around the topics and how they blend with regards to self-awareness as well as difficult conversations. And it sounded to me like in the background, in our kind of green room, we'll say, that there's something kind of pulling at your heartstrings. So let's dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of weird, sometimes little messages will come through. You're like, something's just on your heart. It keeps coming up. You're seeing in every situation you're encountering. And it's around the hard conversations that we need to have at work and at home and ultimately with ourselves. And we were supposed to record before and things happened. And I'm so glad there was a delay in that because I had just come off of something where I needed to have a hard conversation with myself. And like that vulnerability, we've talked about that.
Right.
I probably wasn't in the right headspace. And so that delay, divinely guided, whatever, helped me kind of process some stuff and work through some things. I had some work things, like some life things. So, I think it's trusting in the timing of when to have conversations as well. So I don't know, that's kind of a lot of coming out right now, but that's kind of
just ripping off the freaking Band-Aid here, aren't we?
Yeah. Just let's go for it. Right. So, and it's hard because you have to like really expose so much about what you're thinking and feeling around situations. And
definitely. Where do we want to jump off from when it comes to these hard conversations? Because I'm hearing quite a few things in there, which I absolutely adore. So hearing, Dianna, that there's the introspective piece. So what's going on inside of me? And what do I need right now? And how can I percolate on this so that I can have real conversations with the people around me in an authentic and human-centric way? The other piece that I'm hearing is the topic around difficult conversations, generally speaking, and how do we ensure that we keep that heart-centered approach, even when we have to have those difficult conversations? Yeah. Tell me, so let's go deeper. Tell us more if you're open to the situation so that we can kind of get where your head's at.
Sure. Yeah. Gosh, vulnerability coming out right now. But I think if you want to look at it in the workspace, right? We hear a lot of people say, leave your work or leave your home issues at home. We don't have space for them at work.
Right.
And that's not really fair. And that as a person who sees the whole person, like you can't ask people to just completely shut off parts that are maybe they're struggling in, or they're just really just trying to understand better.
I see you.
As humans, it consumes us. It doesn't mean we want them crying at their desk all day and that we shouldn't maybe intervene in that way in the workspace. But I think there's a point where we need to just let people be who they are and have that conversation. What's going on? Something seems off right now. Are you okay? And that seems to be something that's like a little bit frowned upon. I think we're getting better. I think companies are doing better. Managers are doing better. Like you're training people, like you literally do this. to show people how to have these hard conversations.
Right.
And I think at the core of it, it frees people up to like not have to like hide the heavy.
Right.
And, you know, people talk about, oh, we're family at work and we're here for you. Well, if somebody's going through a whole lot of stuff and all you're thinking about is your metrics and your deliverables and is this person following the rules? Like, okay, but there's something off and their performance is off. So I guess that's kind of where I see it in the workspace.
Fair. I think that's really fair. And there's a few things coming up for me too. I think you're absolutely correct, Dianna, and saying things like, you know, we can't separate our person from our performance, meaning that, you know, gone are the days of the reality that we can have those divides between work and home and, you know, maybe sports life or volunteer life, what have you. It's just not a thing. And having that pressure on your team members, whether known or not known in the workplace, can add levels of stress. And I think that's where a lot of perfectionism is allowed still in the workplace, because it's like, you know, I got to do my 40 hours. I have to hit my objectives. I have to be strong. I have to be able to take all of this on. And I think what we're forgetting is that, you know, of all the emotions that we have, we're meant to experience them all. It's how we look at it from a perspective of, you know, what's really coming up for me. I think that's the first perspective is, you know, really understanding ourselves in the moment and being able to make, I guess, cognitive decisions around how we want to look, feel, see, believe, and then act upon these conversations. I really think it always starts back with that self-awareness piece as to how do I perceive myself and am I correctly understanding how others perceive me? And I think we forget the secondary piece of it oftentimes. The other thing that comes up for me when it comes to difficult conversations is, you know, that self-management piece. So to your point, I loved what you said, Dianna, you know, divine time or not, it allowed you to take space to think. And for some individuals, that can be a really hard act to follow, as to be able to understand when you need space, how to take that space respectfully, especially in the workplace, and then being able to come back to the table to have, you know, a curious conversation, I guess is what I like to call them.
Yeah, I like that. Curious conversation. It's great.
Yeah, definitely.
Because that's really how you get down to it, right? You know, if I'm at work and something is incredibly triggering me today, and I don't have the self-awareness around it, then I'm going to charge through my day and just tear everything up in my path.
Right.
And so to me, that's, oh, I see something there triggering me. I need to be curious about it. What's going on? You can kind of drill down a little bit. Like, for me, it's, well, maybe I thought I was supporting correctly, and now I feel like I didn't support right. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, am I not good enough in this moment? And that is, some people double down. Well, now I'm going to really prove it. And some people are like, I'm just going to shrink. And that's something I used to do. I used to shrink when I felt that little bit of like pullback from maybe I didn't do good enough. But if I haven't worked on that in myself, that trigger can really cause issues in the relationships around me, including with myself.
Definitely, for sure. The other thing that I was hearing you speak to was the normalcy, or making difficult conversations normal. Not that we want to approach every conversation with it being challenging or complex or difficult, but when they do arise, having the culture set in place, that at the end of the day, we trust that we're looking at this, you know, from a place of curiosity in the first instance, and navigating it from a place of problem solving. You know, it's like Brene Brown said, it's, you know, being able to be in the arena together, right? We're ready to rumble. That's a quote that I love. My business partner and I use it together. Whenever we're strategizing, we make jokes, you know, are you ready to rumble? Because we know what that signals to each other is that we may have debates, we may have disagreements. It may feel a little bit uncomfortable or challenging because we're talking about money. We're talking about investments. We're talking about, you know, strategizing and export and all this great stuff for our services. But at the end of the day, we're two very different people that complement each other that make our business great. And so when it comes to, I think, a culture set, it's making sure that your team members know that it's okay to have differences of opinions.
Yeah.
It's how we go about it. And trusting the fact that at the end of the conversation, we may not always have a resolve immediately, but minimally we're going to have some action steps or something else to percolate on so we can come back to the table for future conversations.
We all really have the same need at the end of the day, and that's to be heard and seen and to have space held for us for a little bit. If I'm talking to the CEO and I say, hey, this is bothering me, and he's really gruff and rough, which he's not, but if he was, that would change my dynamics as an HR,
100%.
Right? And then that would also change the way that I deal with my coordinator or my director or anybody else and a manager. I'd be like, well, that's just the way we go. But I think it's the culture that is fed by them.
What I'm hearing is you're collecting your thoughts around, when it comes to difficult conversations, if we're in the middle of an organization and the culture's not set as to where we need it to be or where we think it should be collectively, then it can be really difficult in managing ourselves and therefore reacting to either gruffness or heightened tensions or things that could be quote unquote triggering to ourselves. I'm also hearing veins or things like, how do we have difficult conversations with our direct reports or our team members, even our peers, so that we can stay engaged? Because at the end of the day, that's, to me, in my mind, the name of the game. We need to make sure that our team members are engaged.
Right.
It is a place of work. We do need productivity. It does matter, but how we go about it, coming back to that human-centric word, that's what matters the most. And it's figuring out all of these dynamics of, with the CEO in that example, do I need to adapt to his style? And he's just, more of a dominant personality. So it's me showing him how we're winning. And if he's gruff with me, I'm able to feel confident enough to ask questions so that I get what I need as well, by way of a little bit of calming and understanding where his gruffness is coming from. And conversely, from a leadership perspective, being able to know, trust, and adapt for your team members, right? And so it's knowing what your team members need, trusting that when your team members come to you, they're coming from a place of good, or there's something that's coming up in them that needs attention, and adapting as much as predictably possible without being fake, so that at the end of the day, you're walking away with a win-win.
Right. Yeah. Because people, I think, inherently want to do a really great job.
Yes, I believe
they
it.
Just do. And sometimes you hear the conversations of, oh, they're lazy or they don't want to do this, but are you motivating them correctly? And are you having that, hey, what's going on? What do you really, and sometimes we think a hard conversation is because somebody's done something wrong. For some people, a hard conversation is actually getting to that next level of connection.
100%.
Right. And it's kind of frightening. And I think that's really where the magic is, though, because you find out what makes people tick. And you find out, oh my gosh, you're curious about this and you're motivated by this. Well, I've been thinking about a project and this is like kind of where we're aligning. And so it's giving people the freedom to just express and be who they are without fear of, I'm not going to fit in here because I'm different, And I think that just creates the space for people to kind of showcase the gifts and abilities that we don't see on a resume.
For sure. And so when we're talking about difficult conversations, Dianna, what's your perspective of, and based on your experience, when it comes to individual team members, how do we discuss difficult conversations? So not the difficult conversation itself, but with a team member, understanding how to even approach the subject.
I think the first step is to be a listener, which sounds so basic, right?
Yeah.
If you're having a conversation with somebody and you kind of hear them talk about, they keep saying the same words over, or they keep bringing up the same situation, that is something in them that they need seen. And as a leader, it's good to pick up on that, because there's a moment right there where you can have a hard conversation around something they're kind of edging out, right? Like kind of talking about it. Well, this person keeps making it hard for me. And most managers like, don't want to hear that. Like, I don't want to hear about who makes it hard for you. Just do it, right? But there's a conversation that needs to be held around there, because somebody's feeling like they're not able to expand.
Right.
And when people shrink, we don't get the best of them.
No.
And so I think listening is huge, right? You just got to be listening to those key words, and what are they saying and not saying? What are their body language, right? And I know we all know this stuff, but it's good to repeat it. But don't do it in public, like, don't reprimand and don't call out people, and don't have those, hey, are you really okay conversations in a space where they feel exposed. You may feel comfortable with everybody hearing it, but maybe they're not. And I think it's respecting privacy for people. Not everybody's okay with the exposure of things like that. But it's also just kind of like not taking it personal. Like, just don't take it personal. It's really not even about us. It's not about you as my boss. It's about what's going on inside of me, and how I'm handling the things around me. So I think those are like big three things, which,
Yeah, definitely. And what was coming up for me, very strong and valid point with regards to listening. Oftentimes what I see in leadership is that if I ask the leader the question, hey, are you a good listener to your team members? They're like, yeah, for sure. And with the duality of intuitive performance, I can see them from a coaching perspective and or from a facilitation perspective. And there's been a few engagements where I've seen clients and they're like, yeah, I'm a strong listener, 100%.
Right.
And then you see them in meetings and they're on their iPad or they're on their cell phone, and someone's talking about, whether it be rocks or goals or objectives, or they're talking about something to do with communication or soft skills, whatever we're doing. And the leader is totally checked out, and they'll chime in because they're listening, but they're listening for pieces of information that they need or feel they ought to comment on. And this is where I feel self-awareness backs into the listening piece, because we can think that we're good listeners, but if we're honestly not able to, in that moment, to hear your team members, to read between the lines, to give them your undivided attention, even to be able to feel into some of this stuff. I know a lot of people still don't like the warm and fuzzies.
I do not.
But to me, when we feel into things, it's a skill set. It's a hard skill. It's not a soft skill. It's a human skill, we'll say, right? And if we're having challenges in conceptualizing those things and acting upon them, then we're, what I would call from a coach approach perspective, we're at level 1. So we're listening to information to feed it back. And, when we get into the perspective of what we call level 2 or level 3 listening, then distractions go away all the way up to you're in a bubble with this person and you're truly understanding, interpreting what they say from a duality conversation and being able to feel into what's going on with them. And I think it's really important in leadership to have that skill set, because to your point, if we're seeing something come up over and over and over again, and these are for our task-oriented leaders, this impacts productivity. Like, it's $1 billion market with decreases in productivity. Like, if anybody follows Cy Wakeman, she did a research study, and on average, we're dealing with 2 hours per person per day in emotional waste. And that's revisiting these conversations of what's bothering me. So if we have leadership skill sets where we heighten our listening skills, we can help and lend problem solving to our team members. Is it heavier or a little bit more daunting from an administrative perspective to get people up to speed? Yeah, I won't lie, it is. But once they're there and they see that you're willing to do that for them, they are 2x engaged, and productivity can skyrocket upwards of 20% in 1 year. And so, when we're looking at this from the duality perspective of, okay, how do we balance our operations and our people stuff that we need? It's looking at it from a leadership perspective of what skills do I need for my company and for my team? And how do I level so that I can ensure that my management team is getting the same and my management team is giving the same to my team members? So that's kind of what came up for me from a listening perspective. I also think adding to this, when it comes to difficult conversations, it's normalizing that a difficult conversation doesn't have to be a conversation. It's just a conversation that feels icky.
Yeah.
Right. So again, like when we think about our feelings, we have the feelings that fill our cup or that we lean into. And those are the happiness, the excitement, the joy. Like those are all the things that people tell you to chase.
Yeah.
And then there's the feelings that are not fulfilling or disengage or empty our cup. And those are things like anger, frustration, sorrow, not feeling like we're enough, et cetera, et cetera. And those feelings we've been told to avoid. Yeah. And that can't be furthest from the truth, because when we start to avoid, then that leads into things like addictions, stress, disability, time off work, unhappiness, even, so it's a wide spectrum. And so I feel like we don't have to be psychologists for our team members, but we do have to be able to be emotionally intelligent enough to sit with our team members and be like, hey, this is going to be an awkward conversation because it's an awkward topic. And I might sound awkward to begin with, but I think it's really important, and you're important to me as well. Is it cool if we entertain in this conversation right now? And obviously you tell them what it's about.
Yeah, that's great.
I think that again, normalizing difficult conversation is truly important, because at the end of the day, I think to your point, what you said earlier, Dianna, you get to understand their motivators. You get to understand what they need. You get to understand, what specifically in this conversation do we need to accomplish? And then that I guess the deproductivity can drop and conversations can become quicker once we get over that awkward hump, I believe.
Yeah. And, a lot of people, the indecision of every task is like, if you are not able to make a good decision quickly, it becomes laborsome. And it takes longer. And a lot of that is hesitation within self, right? I am afraid to make this call. It's sending an email. Why am I so freaked out? Why am I I'm looking at all the grammar, I'm analyzing everything. And there's that paralysis of what if the wrong person reads it, or I send it to the wrong person, and oh my gosh, everybody's got PHI, it's like these little weird things, right? But that indecision of, is this a good call? Is that not a good call? And I think if you're paying attention to your people and you see that indecision, it's because they're needing some self-trust. They're not trusting themselves. And is it because you're not trusting them to drive? Are they not trusting themselves? So to me, that's a big signal. If the decisions are hard to make, or maybe they're not always right, but are you allowing room for mistakes? Because mistakes are just opportunities, right? Most things can be corrected, even in HR, right? We see this all the time. We mess up. Nobody sees it if it's small, and everybody sees it if it's big, right? So there's that little bit of, I get it. Like, you don't want to mess up because of visibility of it. But I have never been in my current company, like decimated for making a mistake. There's room for mistakes. And because they are opportunities, that doesn't mean that things don't have to be corrected and stuff like that. And they do, but are we giving people space to be human?
Right.
They make mistakes, but
definitely.
But the more you let them make mistakes and give them the courage to find their way back, they're going to make better decisions. They're going to start trusting themselves in these situations. Like, oh, my intuition was right. I don't need to doubt myself in this. Or if I do mess up, my boss isn't going to fire me today. So there's something to be said about indecision as well.
Definitely. And I think we can all learn from the tech industry, like fail fast, right? Fail fast because you get answers. Fail fast because it gives us an opportunity to problem solve. Fail fast because it gives us an opportunity to learn. And I think that's where in most organizations, difficult conversations arise, or the perception of the same, because we get into this analysis paralysis mode, or we freeze because we don't want to make the wrong decision. What if I have to have a difficult conversation after this, or before this, or this is? So I totally agree with you 100%. Having the landscape and the safety net of your team members, knowing that 9 times out of 10, for the most part, failure is a way for us to figure things out, right?
Yeah.
Either by way of individual performance. It could have to do with actual design. It could it could actually save us millions of dollars if we make this one, small mistake up front. Of course, applying common sense, there are situations where if we fail, it's a large one.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's been case studies where, with GE, if I remember correctly, there was the head of operations. We know him as Jack Welch, I do believe. And there was a huge mistake. Fatal, like there was a fire, nobody died, but instead of firing him, head office pulled him in to have a conversation to right size him and mentor him to not make that same mistake again.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Can you imagine, right? Having that culture.
Let go for less.
I mean, that's an extreme example, Dianna, but you get where I'm going with this in the sense of, to your point, everybody doesn't go into the workplace being like, hey, how am I going to mess this up or muck this up today? We go in from a place of genuinely wanting to do the best based on where we're jumping off from. Yeah. And so I think it's collectively understanding each other that sometimes having those difficult conversations minimally can provide us perspective and maximally can prevent fatal errors. I'd like to dig in a little bit deeper on the individual side of things. How would you approach difficult conversations, or how would you mentor someone around their beliefs and mindset when it comes to difficult conversations?
So I think if I'm talking to someone and I'm coaching them how to have one, I would actually coach them how to have one with themselves first. How do you talk to yourself? How are you correcting yourself? How are you showing yourself grace? Because how you show yourself is how you're going to show to others. And some people are really good about masking up, and they're mean and hard to themselves, and they are sugar sweet, but there's a limit, right? And that runs out. And then all of a sudden there's this exposure of self that you're just like, wow, where is that coming from? But you're frustrated. Your boundaries have been crossed. You've been quiet when you should have spoke up. So I think the first thing is, what do you want?
Right.
Most people it's just such a frightening question. It doesn't mean do what you want, but just what do you want? I want to come to work and I want to have a job where I have flexible hours and I can take off for my kids' things and I'm not guilted of. These are things you want. Okay. So is the company you're working at aligned to that? Well, no, they make me work 5-10-hour shifts. Even if I don't have, then that's not in alignment and you need to leave. Right. Because all you're doing then is trying to like steer a ship in a direction that you and your inside level, your soul level is saying, why are you here? You're missing out on family stuff, which you said is important. You're missing out on downtime because you said it was important, but now that's important. And I think there's more to it than that, other than just the hours and stuff, but it's really, what do you want? I want to go in, I want to do a good job, and I want to support. I love to support people, Ange. Right. It makes my heart so full, right?
I know you. Like, I mean, I think we've only had like 2 conversations, but immediately my heart sang as soon as I heard you speak about people, because you have a passion. It's not just a job of HR. Like, you genuinely want people to do well, using your words, on a soul level. And I think if we're digging deeper from a tactical perspective, I love that question. Even when it comes to day-to-day difficult conversations, what do you want to get out of this? Right. And so essentially you're contracting with yourself and then can contract with others to say, I thought about this. Here's what I want to get out of this conversation. I want to hear too. What do you want to get out of this conversation? Because I feel like when it comes to difficult conversations, those types of questions are often answered at the end. So it's like, here's my point of view. Here's your point of view. Here's my debate. Here's your debate. Maybe we'll go full circle 5 times in the amount of the hour that we have together. And then at the end of it, we figure out what each other wants. I think if we kind of rip the Band-Aid off and come from a place of curiosity to understand what we want out of the gate, then that can prevent a lot of that circle debate as well as being vulnerable and normalizing it across all genders to say things like, I feel. At work, it's okay to say, I feel frustrated about this because, or I feel excited about this because. It's allowing people in so that they understand where you're coming from. Because if you were, if we were talking about something, like maybe we're talking about a new HR engagement project, and, we have to have a difficult conversation around, do we attach a budget or not to this, right? And so I'm coming to you with a really exciting idea, but it's going to cost the company money. Whereas you're looking at it from maybe a level that has to do with budget. And conversely, we don't have it in the budget for the remainder of 2022, but have to look at 2023.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to just come across stern and say, no, we don't have it in the budget.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned around and I said something to the effect of, well, Dianna, I'm feeling frustrated because I've spent like 6 hours researching these things. I thought this was for our Q4 rocks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really confused as to why we're being so stern about the budget.
Yeah.
Then it can kind of allow you to step back and be like, oh, geez, Ange, I didn't tell you about the fact that we had an extra spend from an HR perspective. Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. Versus me holding on to my emotions and just telling you what it should be, and you holding on to your emotions and being like, okay, you need to back up. I don't know why you're coming at me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah. I think being asked why is very intimidating to a lot of people in charge.
Yeah.
Like, it's like this kind of like disciplinarian, like, you don't talk to me that way. And that's not true. I am a person who seeks clarification often. I need to know more. And it's not because I don't trust you. It's because I need to know if what I'm thinking in my thought process is on point. Am I tracking? And am I in alignment? So for me to go and to say, hey, why are we not able to? Well, most people would just be like, well, fine. Gosh, there's such a whatever. I promise I said I wouldn't try to swear today. So, but so
no judgment.
Such a beep, right? And why are they like this to me all the time? Every time it's a no. Well, maybe just ask the question.
Right.
And that's hard because sometimes you get met with a door, and sometimes you just get met with more force, right? Of, like, well, now you don't feel like you're important enough to know the answer, but you're partnered in. So you do deserve an answer. And I think empowering people to ask why is a really great place to start too. Like, it's okay to ask me why. I'm not offended by that. Ask me all the whys, because the more you understand, then maybe the closer we get to understanding and moving forward with a different plan for Q1, right? So I think why is a really great thing to just start implementing into every conversation.
Yeah, I enjoy that 100%.
Yeah.
When it comes to like a coach approach perspective, or even from an HR perspective, I think often asking why in some circumstances can add a level of combativeness. I just want to play devil's advocate for a second.
Yeah, for sure.
I know exactly where you're going with it in the sense that asking, what's the purpose? How are we going about this? What does this mean to us? Those types of questions. But if I were to approach someone oftentimes and say, well, why did you do it that way? Immediately we go into, reactive mode, and reactive mode can mean different things to different people, from shrinking to defending. And so I appreciate and understand the reason behind asking the question can be hard, especially to your upper management team. And I think it's understanding your audience in the first instance to, Diana's, front loading her conversation. She's bold, she's open. So I can ask her why 100%.
Yeah.
But I might speak to the CEO much differently to be like, hey, can I have a little bit more information to have a full landscape or a full scope as to how we're approaching this? And inadvertently that can give me the why.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We should not walk into our C-suite. Why are you doing this? Like, there is definitely know your audience. Yeah. I'm glad you put that out there. Like, I don't want somebody losing their job because I was like, just ask why, and they do it. But I think it's fair to say you are empowered to ask why.
Yes, very much so.
Create that as part of your culture. And then if you've done the work in yourself, then I'm not triggered by your why question or your
100%.
I just see it as a bridge to get through a gap. And so that's why a lot of what you do is important too, because you're helping managers understand the why, the pushback. It's not really about you personally.
No,
it's just about the person trying to understand their place and what you're trying to create. People are afraid of being kicked out of spaces all the time.
100%, right? Figuratively and emotionally, for sure. So
then being able to ask the questions just allows them to feel safer in their container that they're in. That's it.
100%.
So
Yeah,
if everybody
definitely.
could just kind of stop being like, oh my gosh, you're challenging me. It's not a challenge, but it could come across that way. So people do need to watch their tone and the words that they use around the why. But if you can kind of train people how to ask why in a way that fits, I think it's a great way.
Definitely. And I like the fact that you keep going in between or threading in the fact that part of this is culture. This is how we set up for a whole organization. Part of this is management or leadership expectations, albeit our styles are going to be a little bit differently, but this is typically speaking our core and what we do. And then I hear a third piece in there where it's like individually, how do we manage ourselves and the information that's coming into us? And you said it a couple times now. So depending on what you need to heal. And I really enjoy that perspective because it's not, I think what I'm hearing is it's not about looking at distinct traumas, but more specifically looking at it from what do you need to heal from a trigger perspective? Because certain people can say certain things with an opposing intent of how we take it. And I think that comes back around full circle to levels of self-awareness as to what's going to positively impact me and what's going to negatively impact me. And then what do I choose to do with this information now that I know it? Because so many of us leaders and individuals, professionals in general, walk around on autopilot. And I had a coaching client, just a sidebar example, we'll go down a rabbit hole here. I had a coaching client and I was able to, like, it was a lot of riffing back and forth, right? So we would laugh, we'd carry on, but a lot of experiential coaching that took place there. And one day they were expressing from a place of vulnerability around how they felt about a conversation in the workplace. And I had this epiphany and I was like, have you ever taken like training around your feelings or training around emotional intelligence or, are your parents psychologists? And I was being kind of sarcastic because I had that latitude to do so. And they were like, no, not at all. And I was just like, okay, I just wanted to understand the landscape before I asked this question. And I said, how can we be expected to manage ourselves as a leader in the workplace if we're not taught how to do it and now we're adults?
Yeah.
Tell me more about this. And they reflected on it. They're like, oh, geez, wow. And so what was comical about this situation is that we co-created this idea that we're full-blown adults and professionals with MBAs, with, beyond whatever type of acronym you have behind or letters behind your name. But when it comes to dealing with conflict or dealing with something that makes us feel uncomfortable or excited or overstimulated, 9 times out of 10, it's like we have these little toddlers running around in our brain, these emotional toddlers, like I'm triggered. So we all have different ways of reacting based on those triggers, but coming full circle and out of that rabbit hole, I guess we'll say, Dianna, I feel looking at it from the perspective of when it comes to healing our traumas is more so around understanding our triggers and identifying what we need, right? Obviously, in different circles, in different conversations, in different scenarios, we're going to have different levels of how we express that. But I feel like it's a pendulum where we have to figure out, do I just ask for what I need all the way up to, am I, naked with regards to the conversation to say, I'm feeling this way, I feel triggered, and here's why I feel triggered, and here's what I need from you. Can you be there for me? Depending on relationships, right? So that's kind of what comes up for me. And I think it's really important to make note of those types of things because that's the basis of how we radiate within conversations, right? So if I'm always taking things personal in the workplace, how can I be overtly there for my team members? And I think that goes back to, what you were saying as well, with regards to being able to ask the question why and normalizing that piece too.
Yeah, it's the mirror first. And then the window, right?
Yes. I love that.
Yeah. This friend of mine, he said it one day and I was like, oh my gosh, that
the
is
mirror
so
first
accurate.
and then the window. Yeah.
The mirror first, then the window. So the trigger hits, right? And that's the moment to pause and observe. What am I feeling? What's coming up? What am I really upset about here? Not judging it. It's just observing it, right? Well, I said I had to be done by this time and they didn't care and they kept going. Well, whose boundary was that? It was your boundary, and you're responsible for holding your boundary. So that trigger is saying you're not holding a boundary. You're not speaking your truth. You're not in alignment. And instead of like addressing it, we just flare up from it because we're not observing it, right? We're reacting, we're responding, we're in that emotional muscle memory around it, right? Definitely. We're just like, oh man, this person's Susan. Every time it's Susan, right? But we're not really mad at Susan. We're mad at ourselves because we didn't hold the boundary to get home in time to be there for a commitment that we made. And now we feel shame around not meeting that commitment. 100%. And we're blaming the wrong people. Tell your boss, I cannot take meetings after a certain time on these days. And if they schedule them, you have to decline them. Hard, right? If you're higher up, it's almost impossible. Very much so. Lower, it's like even more impossible because what if I don't get the promotion? What if I don't get the raise? What if I don't get the next opportunity? Because
will I be judged?
But that's my trigger because it's important to me that I follow through on my commitments. And so a lot of times we think, oh, the discontentment that comes at work, it's a signal too. All of this is a signal. Are you in alignment with what you have said is important to you? Right. And so I don't know. It's just a really fascinating part of life. Into that. I go for hours on it.
For sure. And likewise, Dianna, I could speak to hours for you, with you, on these types of topics around human-centric approaches. Really appreciative of you being here with me today. And wrapping things up, what would you say are the top 3 things to think about when it comes to difficult conversations based on what we spoke about today?
Sure. So are you coming in authentic? Are you willing to be held accountable in the conversation? And are you in alignment with what you are agreeing to? Like, is the conversation in alignment with what you want for your team? You know, are you approaching it in that manner? So I think those 3 words like hit everything. For everything. Am I in alignment? Am I being accountable? Am I being authentic?
The 3 A's.
The 3 A's, right?
Yeah.
I think that's watch out, AAA, here we come. We're taking it over, right? But I think that's important. And if you kind of focus on that, I think you'll probably hit out of the ballpark. Maybe not first, but you'll get there.
It's a process, keeping that in mind too. Yeah, you know, absolutely. we can't overnight go from discomfort to comfort. That's for sure. Yeah. Again, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here, Dianna. And my pleasure. And just a quick note to our listenership or subscribership out there. If any of our listeners happen to be leadership, ownership, or even in the HR space, and you want to hear more about our podcast topics, feel free to reach out to us on our website at www.intuitiveperformance.com. Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.